Hello. I have been seeing a lot of content lately from various creators who talk mostly about weight loss. And a lot of the messaging that I have seen is that you need to be weighing all of your food in order to lose weight. So, in this video, I wanted to take a more nuanced approach to discussing if you should use a food scale for the sake of weight loss or any particular nutrition goal. So, what we're going to cover in this video is some of the cons of using a food scale, why you might not be a good option for you. We're also going to discuss some of the potential reasons for why you may find using a food scale or weighing your food beneficial. And finally, we're going to talk about 3 tips for using it effectively to get closer to your goals. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want you to keep in mind is that the food scale is a tool that may help you assess your energy intake. It is not a requirement for weight loss. The only thing that we really need to achieve weight loss is a caloric deficit. And there is lots of ways to do that, both through means of tracking and counting calories and not tracking or counting calories. So there's a lot of options out there as far as this particular approach goes. So here are some cons of using the food scale. The first thing to keep in mind is that it is not recommended if you have a history of disordered eating or you've ever had an eating disorder. Disordered eating is a pretty vague term. There's not one clear definition for it. So what I will say is if you're considering using it, but you are someone who tends to sort of have very neurotic tendencies or slightly obsessive tendencies, you get really caught up in details and numbers or really overwhelmed in them. The food scale sometimes weighing our food can make us very neurotic. And so if you don't want to reinforce that tendency, that this may not be the right strategy for you. The other thing is sometimes when we get really fixated on the numbers and weighing our food and tracking everything really closely, it can result in a very negative relationship with food. So that's something you're working on. Weighing your food right now may not be the best option. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's tedious and it can be very impractical. So, when you're out at a restaurant, you want to be carrying a food scale around your purse, right? Same thing at social outings. Food is more than just fuel. It is also part of our culture, part of our social landscape. So it has a lot of different meanings outside of just the food, what we eat to keep us alive. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have kids or you're around children or teens, it's a very clear exhibition of dieting behavior that kids and teens can pick up on. So I am not anti-food scale by any means or weighing your food or anti-weight loss, but I do think it's something that it's important that we are cognizant of and that we shield children from. So this is not something that I would personally recommend doing in front of children. And finally, if it's the only tool that you're using for tracking, then you're not going to develop the cognitive flexibility and skills to manage energy intake or figure out if you're in a deficit or weight maintenance in different settings. There are a lot of times in life where the food scale does not make sense. So I think it is a tool. I don't think it should be the only tool when we are pursuing weight loss and then ultimately, hopefully, long-term weight maintenance. So here's some of the pros, why it may be beneficial. The first thing is, of course, it's higher accuracy. So if you're not really sure of your energy intake, it gives you information. It lets you know, like, okay, that is what 4 ounces of chicken looks like. That is what 200 calories of peanut butter looks like or whatever. So it is more accurate. It's going to give you a more accurate sense of a portion size. It's also sometimes helpful for troubleshooting weight loss because, frankly, we don't want to be in a really aggressive caloric deficit, but sometimes it's really easy to end up out of a deficit and in maintenance, even when we're trying to be in a deficit if the tracking is off. And as human beings, there's nothing immoral or wrong or that you've done anything wrong about this. We tend to just be pretty bad at tracking. So sometimes it can be helpful for troubleshooting weight loss. If you haven't seen the scale move or any change in measurements for several weeks, then sometimes there may be a tracking error, and using a food scale in the short term can help you figure out where those tracking errors may be happening. It also can be a learning tool for general awareness around your portion sizes look like. So if there are foods that you tend to eat a lot of, and you don't want to have to you don't want to feel as insecure about what you're logging or your accuracy when let's say you're eating out, it is sometimes helpful to know, like, oh, that is what 4 ounces of chicken breast looks like, or whatever, the amount of salad dressing or that kind of thing. And then finally, you can apply it to specific situations, which I'm going to talk more about in a moment. So For example, you don't need to track everything. Maybe you just want to make sure you hit your protein, so you just track protein intake. It can also be helpful for tracking things that tend to be a little bit more calorically dense, like fats, which that doesn't make them bad. It just means that if the math or the tracking is off, it's going to add up a lot quicker than, say, calculating the amount of vegetables incorrectly. All right, so here are my 3 tips for using the food scale effectively if you've decided that it is a tool that you want to try. So the first thing I would suggest is be strategic about the foods that you choose to weigh. So I don't think you need to weigh all your food. I don't think you necessarily should weigh all of your food. Again, it's a very tedious, neurotic experience. So what I would say is track the foods that are more calorically dense or hard to assess. So typically fats or oils, peanut butter, cooking oil. I use peanut butter as an example. It's really cliche, but truth be told, 200 calories worth of peanut butter on a slice of bread or 400 looks about the same. Another one is like cereal and granola. What we think is a single serving is often multiple servings. So it can just be helpful to figure out like, oh, that's what that actually looks like. Or like pastries are like highly palatable foods. So those tend to be foods that are like really high in sugar and fat. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't eat them or that they're going to be bad for your health, because I think all foods can fit into a health promoting diet. But I do think those, if you have a weight loss goal, those calories can add up pretty quickly. And if you don't have a good sense of how much equates with a certain amount of calories or energy intake, then sometimes the food scale can help you just more accurately assess those things. You can also use it just to gain awareness around foods you frequently eat. So if there's just certain things that you eat all the time or that you tend to like to eat when you eat out, you can just sort of be like, I'm going to use this to gain awareness around just a couple things that I'm not sure about. And then finally, like, you don't need to weigh your vegetables or your fruit. So things that are not as calorically dense, if you want to like just pick where to put your energy, probably don't worry about that. Eyeballing the difference between a couple ounces of vegetables one way or the other is not going to make a big difference typically in fat loss or weight loss. All right, tip number 2. So you can use this for learning how to estimate portions. I think this is really important. I think this also gives you an exit strategy so you don't feel like you have to use the food scale forever. So basically, after you've measured something out on the food scale, you can start eyeballing what the amount is, what you think the amount is, and then weigh it afterwards. So I have just an example here, these little pictures of like, sometimes it's called the palm method. So for example, with protein, a serving of protein or somewhere between 3 to 5 ounces, 4 ounces is usually about the size of our palm. So if you are able to say, weigh out your protein, look at the relative size of it relative to your hand. Once you've done that a few times, you know what that looks like. You can start putting it in the bowl first and then weighing it second. So this is a good way to start to teach yourself how to eyeball portions, again, without having to use the food scale forever. So this is a really helpful strategy. And again, you don't need to do it for everything. I would just do it for the foods that you are, let's say, most concerned about sort of being able to track accurately, or just the things you eat most frequently, or again, things that tend to be more calorically dense. And then finally, you can use it as an awareness tool for a short period of time and then start to move away from it or practice it along other skills. So the biggest issue, in my opinion, with the food scale, other than it can promote very neurotic behavior, which we do not want, is that it is only one tool. And whatever tools we use for weight loss, we want to match the way that we want to live and eat as closely as possible. And the food scale is not how most of us want to live or eat. We don't have to spend all of our time weighing out our food. So, like I said, tool number 2, if you can learn how to eyeball it, that is going to help you not feel as reliant on it. I would say use it for a short period of time. Like, I'm going to spend 2 weeks using it, maybe for a handful of meals, and then not worry about it for a while and see how I do. And then also keeping in mind, there's other tools that you want to work on, both just from a nutrition standpoint and if you have a weight loss goal for promoting weight loss and, again, long-term weight maintenance. So this is things like noticing and honoring your hunger and fullness cues. So those internal cues, not just external things, so you can honor what you're feeling and be aware of what you're feeling and when you need food and how much food you need. Like I said, you can use the palm method to estimate portions. I think that we can often move from the food scale to the palm method if you're worried about accuracy, and that can be a helpful transition out of numbers land, if you will. Another important tip or tool is going to be to create meals that promote both enjoyment, they're things that you like, and satiety, so things that aren't going to leave you hungry 5 minutes later. I think it's really important to work on your relationship with food, particularly foods that you've struggled with in the past that you feel out of control with, figuring out how to reintroduce them and have a healthy relationship to them. To me, that's a lot more important than knowing what 4 ounces of chicken breast looks like. And then also working on body image and body appreciation, even if you are trying to actively change your body, because I can tell you weight loss is not necessarily going to make you happier with your body, yourself, or your life. So in summary, the food scale is a tool. It's not a requirement for weight loss, and it's not appropriate for all individuals. Like I said, if you have a history of eating disorders and disordered eating, this is probably not the tool for you. Ideally, whatever strategies you're going to use for weight loss should feel sustainable and should most closely align with how you prefer to eat as possible. So again, some of these can be short-term learning tools, but they're not necessarily good long-term tools to use. So that is all I have for you today. If you want to get in touch, here are some places that you can get in touch with me or find me. If you have questions or other video topic requests, feel free to drop them in the comment section. I appreciate you watching, and I will catch you in another video.